Hi, this is Renan Joran at Agilian. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That's what they say. For example, when you build a house, would you forget to first build the foundations? The house is not going to last for very long, right? So when you develop a new electronic product, same thing. There's certain steps, certain validations that you don't want to skip. There's a process for that. It's called the new product introduction process. Let me walk you through it. I'm going to explain how we work when developing a new product and bringing it into manufacturing. And a lot of companies call this NPI, the new product introduction process. And we gave it a few names. There's 6 big phases in the way we manage it. The first 3 phases here are during the initial product design and development, okay, until the product design is frozen, and then the manufacturing and testing processes are developed until the product can be in high volume production. In the beginning, these phases is a lot of discovery, a lot of problem solving, right? And as we make progress here and we get closer to mass production, the ability to forecast the timelines, the amount of work, etc., gets higher. Okay, if you don't follow a certain process here, you might spend a lot of time in product development limbo. Okay, however, here, yeah, if you don't follow the certain process here, you're going to have a lot of very expensive problems in mass production. Okay, so it's important to follow a certain process all along, and this is the topic of this presentation. This is the same idea here with more details, but we're going to go through them one by one. And why does this curve go up and to the right? Because, and especially in these phases here, closer to mass production, every phase comes with some builds. Okay, so maybe prototype 1, 2, 3, EVT, what people sometimes call engineering validation testing, right? Confirming that it actually works properly. Each build comes with more and more samples typically. So here, when there's tooling, maybe DVT1, DVT2 are done in higher numbers of units, and then it goes up again here and again here. Okay, let's cover this one by one. So phase 1 is about the requirements. You need to prepare a brief, okay, and at the same time, it's good to do a little bit of risk analysis, research in compliance requirements and things like that. And when people come to us with a brief, there's 2 big issues. The first one is sometimes they say, well, it has to be perfect. And we tell them, wait a minute, even Apple products are not perfect. They say, oh, you know, and people really want to push the envelope. So we give them some ideas, some examples like this. Well, you want to do like Apple, maybe you need to develop your own battery cells or your own chips, right? If you want to do exactly what you want. The other big issue that comes up again and again and again is that it is not specific, not measurable. Okay, the sound must be perfect. Okay, well, there are ways probably to measure this, right? Such as the audio distortion, you know, the price, the resistance to shocks, and all these types of things usually can be translated into some engineering terms. Okay, that can be tested, can be measured. People actually know what you are aiming for. Okay, phase 2, basically, it is usually a mistake, except for the most simple of products, to go directly into the details of the engineering design. It's good to take a few weeks and maybe more to do what we call a feasibility study. Some people just call it like early proof of concept. Maybe compare certain design architectures, different approaches, approach some of the big challenges, and just get to know more about where we're going and make some big decisions early, okay? And really, feasibility study is what transforms the product requirements and basically the concept into a real product, or at least a clear plan for a real product. and then you can go into the details of the engineering design. Okay, so again, thinking of alternative options, testing them, doing some maybe calculations, some mock-ups, etc. Now also working on industrial design to really clarify what is the user interface going to be like, etc., etc. Okay. Also on the marketing side, try to validate the concept. This all of this is very, very important. Okay, then prototyping, go into the engineering design work, into the details. Okay, so this is not just about let's make a prototype. It's good to have a plan, what you want to achieve, do the actual engineering work, design work, etc. Get the materials, build the prototypes, test them. Also try to get some feedback if possible from users, target users, and then go back into the next iteration. And sometimes for complicated products or products that really push the envelope, you might need to do a lot of different iterations. Another thing to keep in mind is that there are basically two tracks for most electromechanical products. One is for the look and feel, so you work with industrial designers, you go through sketches, mock-ups, etc., and then maybe physical look-like prototypes. This is exactly the size, the look and feel, etc. And another track is for function, maybe very rough, semi-functional proof of concept prototypes, integrating the hardware and the software for products with electronics. Very often there's embedded software, full-scale work-like prototypes, and then it comes together into prototypes that both work and look like the intended product. Okay, don't try to do everything at once together. It might be good to think of it as two separate tracks. Can be done in parallel, can be done sometimes, if one of them is much more challenging, maybe start with the one that is more challenging, presents the highest amount of risk. Okay, it's also good, obviously good to go agile and do some fast iterations, get some feedback from users, iterate from that, but at the same time, it's good to work on a plan so you kind of have an idea about where you're going, right? Okay, now next phase is tooling. This is the exciting phase where you have an idea, okay, this is exactly what the product does, what it looks like, etc., etc. The product design is frozen. So here, very often, we make tooling for plastic parts, silicon parts, some metal parts, etc. Some specialized tooling might have to be done by specialized component suppliers. Okay. In parallel, there's also a lot of things that take place. You need to have a quality plan, a production plan, etc. Okay. And once the tooling is ready, it is validated by assembling some prototypes with the parts coming off of tooling and testing them. And very often, reliability testing is very important to make sure that the product is not likely to fail early in its life. And we do a lot of that in our own lab. Also, compliance tests and certifications. We work with various testing labs for that. Okay. So what I mentioned is there's a lot of preparations on about the production process, the testing process, quality, preparing the checklist, and so on. Okay. And then that's where you put together samples. You make a build of maybe, we make a build of maybe 10, 20, 30 prototypes, okay, and send them for testing. Also send them maybe for some user testing, right? Okay, then phase 5, pre-production. We do not go directly into mass production. Maybe you have some big orders, a big customer, or maybe you did a big Kickstarter campaign or something like that. Maybe you have 5,000 pieces to deliver, or 10,000 pieces to deliver, or 20,000. No, do not go directly into high volume production. This is very risky. Okay, if it's a new product, an innovative product, you really need to follow this NPI process without skipping any important phase. And here, when we say at least one small pre-production run, that's what we mean, right? So we do everything based on our plan for mass production, but on a much smaller scale, so that if there are issues, they are much less impactful, much less expensive. Okay, so it really validates the readiness for production. Okay, so the components need to be
purchased, need to be made, and then everything like mass production, incoming, quality control, the assembly, testing, packaging, all of that work, in-process quality control, outgoing quality control, and so on. Close monitoring also of the production rate, and then based on, okay, how many pieces had to be reworked, how many pieces did we make in how many hours or days, like is there any major issue here that needs to be fixed before we go into mass production. If there's still some issues, then we go back and do it again. Okay. Another reason to do more than one pre-production pilot run, which is what we advise, it's not always a must, but we really advise for it anyway, and a lot of companies with a lot of experience in new product introduction do it systematically, is that you might have one pilot run where everything is within the tolerance. Okay, this is the tolerance limit. Everything is nicely centered, everything okay. But then you do the next one and maybe the process is not very stable, and then you see it goes way to a side and then some parts are out of tolerance. Well, if you just do one batch, you're not going to see that, and then you go into mass production and you do this on a very large scale, and maybe you have a lot of parts out of tolerance. That means a lot of maybe rework, scrap, reproduction. That means delays, that means excess costs, that means all kinds of issues. Just to visualize this in another way, if you assume the process is going to be stable, okay, everything is going to be roughly the same, batch 1, 2, 3, etc. But maybe the reality is that you're lucky the first one in the first batch, but then the process is not very stable. Okay, again, for custom design parts that are made the first time for your product, this is not uncommon. This is actually what you should expect. Okay, until we know the issues, we see the issues, and we try to act on them, right? Okay. And another way to show this is that the first time you might have everything nicely centered, way within the tolerance, but then you do the other batches and then maybe you see the some parts out of tolerance here and there, and then actually the average of that process is it's very widely distributed. It's not tightly centered and tightly concentrated, and there's a lot of parts out of tolerance that are going to make assembly more complicated, that are going maybe to shorten the life of the product, and so on and so forth. So all of that to say, it's good to do more than one pre-production pilot run if you have the luxury to do that. Okay, and then mass production. But again, before going to mass production, one thing we always try to emphasize is if you have the luxury not to go into mass production first, it might be a very good idea to deliver maybe 50 pieces, 100 pieces to real users that are going to use it for maybe 1, 2, 3 months and give you feedback. Okay, because again, if it's a very innovative product, you might not have designed the product the right way, or the product might not be used in the way you're thinking. Okay, so it's very important to have the feedback from the market if you have the luxury to wait a little bit. Okay, now mass production is what you expect. Buy the components, make the components, do the assembly, testing, packing, etc., just on a larger scale. Now, in the first 1, 2, 3 batches, it might not be as stable as you would hope. Maybe okay, it's very common that the process keeps getting better as fixtures, jigs, etc., get developed. Maybe the testing stations get improved, and so on. Okay, and maybe you might need to do engineering changes. Okay, to address some the causes of some issues. So as you scale up, batch number 1, number 2, number 3, the confidence should go up. Okay, and it should be more and more mature. That's what we call it. Okay, the product and the process should be more and more mature. Now, a little bit more information before we end this video. Now, how do we onboard a new customer? Okay, so in the first call, typically we explain how we work, we explain the new product introduction process. We see if you're the new kind of customer coming to us, if you have some experience in that, if you agree in the value of following actually a proper process, structured process. We try to get some information and we see, okay, the certain things that indicate that the project is much more likely to be successful, okay, as we listed here, and we could do a deep dive to really understand, and then we take it from there. Okay. A question we get asked all the time is, how long does it take typically? And this is for a relatively average type of project that we work on, an electromechanical product, not very simple, but not excessively difficult either. And let's say on your side, you've been doing some component sourcing and some engineering design work. Okay, you've been doing some prototyping, etc. Okay, and let's say we're gonna take over here. Okay, we can start to work earlier, but in some cases we start here. There's a handover to the contract manufacturer, right? Typically, we do design for manufacturing reviews. We tell you what needs to be fixed. Either we fix it or you fix it on your side. We usually need to put together the last prototype or prototypes on your side and test it. Okay, that's how we really get familiar with the product design and so on. And at this point, let's say things are frozen and confirmed. Then it goes into tooling fabrication, tooling trials, putting together tooling prototypes, all the background preparations that I mentioned. From these tooling samples, launch some testing and certifications. Okay. Then at one point, the pre-production pilot run. So let's see, at least one, let's count roughly 1 month. And this together is, let's say, 6 weeks plus the testing here. If you don't want to wait for the result of the testing, pre-production pilot runs can start earlier. Let's say 1 is sufficient and you're willing to accept the risk and you go into mass production right away. This is roughly the timelines that you might be looking at. Now, what types of services do we charge for? Okay, that's also a common question we have. For mass production, obviously, we charge the unit price for production, right? But here, there might be some sourcing work we need to do, design for manufacturing review. We might have to do the fixes if you don't want to do it on your side. Putting together the prototype. Okay, all of this is in phase 3, plus maybe packaging design and prototyping, etc. The tooling fabrication, putting the tooling prototypes together, and the testing. All of this needs to be paid, okay? Not to us directly, okay? Some of this might be paid to some specialized compliance labs, etc. But these are some costs. Putting together the plan for production and quality. There's some work to do here to put together the QC checklist and so on and so forth, work instructions for assembly, etc. And all the pre-production setup and doing the pilot run. Okay, there's some services here to develop the process for manufacturing and testing. Okay. And another question we get very often is, okay, but how about we are really in a hurry? Can you make things faster? And certain things can be done in parallel. The cost, usually the budget is higher, sometimes much higher, because it might necessitate a lot of extra project management, a lot of extra complexity, etc. As we do things in parallel, sometimes we do things and then we see that we need to go back because what happened here is impacting what happened here. Okay, so there's maybe more loops and more rework loops, but it is usually possible to shave off 1 or 2 months here, sometimes more, it depends. And the last topic I want to cover, very important topic, is that people come to us sometimes with a very ambitious kind of plan and roadmap for their product. But what we try to tell them is, look, if this is the first version of your product, don't try to have something that already covers all of the needs of your target market. This is not the objective of version 1. The objective of version 1 is to get some feedback from the market and start to work with early innovators, okay? And in version 2, you will know a lot of the shortcomings of version 1 and you will fix them, okay? And version 3 and so on. And the idea, and this comes from a book by Tony Fadell, who was very high-level exec at Apple and then founded Nest, very successful hardware executive. And he says basically the V1 of your product should go for a certain market a certain type of users, and version 2 would be for another type of users. Don't try to come up with a perfect product. And really the big takeaway here is try to simplify the first version of your product. And we can talk about it and give you some ideas about that. Okay, I hope this was helpful, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.